to get started. Hopefully you're all here. I know there's a couple of people still coming in from the waiting room, but looks like we've got the majority of the group here, which is great, and we'll be ready to get going very, very shortly. So just again, a reminder that on the call, apart from all of you members, we've got the facilitation team, we've got some of the secretariat, we've got some of the researchers, and some of you will meet the researchers and see the researchers in your breakout rooms as we get going forward in the discussion. We've also got a number of our evidence leads here, so people who are coming both to give you information, but also Ian and others who are following us the whole way through the journey, and our conveners as well. So, quite a full house and lots of people really interested in what's going on and what we're going to be doing over the next few hours. So I guess one of the things I need to tell you is what we are going to be doing. So yesterday we focused very much on learning a bit more about what's going on in Scotland and where there are opportunities in terms of both challenges and opportunities, I guess, in terms of things like travel and work, homes and communities, diet and lifestyle. And we're going to be going back to some of that later in the day to really start thinking. I know it was some groups I know found it a bit sort of rushed at the end, having to think through all of these different topics, but it just is about the range of things that impact on, well, how do we make recommendations that are going to enable Scotland to change in a way to tackle the climate emergency in an effective and fair way. That's what we're really going to be focusing on today. This morning, we're going to hear a bit more about different views again on how this should happen, including from the Children's Parliament, which I know you all enjoyed the video last time, and we've got another video from the children who've been working alongside this process to make sure that we're hearing the voices of the younger generation that actually can't be part of the assembly itself. We're also going to hear about adaptation in Scotland and how Scotland needs to think about adapting to some of the climate change situation that's happened already and is happening. And then we're also going to hear a bit about some of these enablers of change. And I know people were talking yesterday about, like, we can suggest all these things, but how does that get paid for? Where does the power lie to actually make something happen? So we're going to be talking not only about the levels where change can happen, which we talked a bit about yesterday, but we're also going to be talking about some of those other functions of government and others that can help enable some of these changes we're talking about to potentially happen. But then actually in the afternoon, we're really, really going to slow down and think about fairness. It's key to the question that we've been set as an assembly. So we're going to spend some time this afternoon really digging down into, well, what does fair mean? What does fair mean for each of us individually? What does it mean in context of climate change? But also, what does it mean for Scotland and Scotland's place in the world? So we've got a big day ahead. But we're going to have some time. You'll have some more time in some of your discussion groups today to really start thinking together about what some of these things mean. So before we go any further, I'm going to really pass over to Ian now to come and say hello and start introducing us to, I suppose, the content of what we're going to get into today. So,
thanks, Kayla. Thanks, everyone. Morning, all. Morning, and welcome to day 2 of our second weekend of Scotland's Climate Assembly. It's another packed but fascinating day that we've got in store for you. As Kayla outlined in the morning, we're going to hear about how we can and why we actually need to adapt to climate change in Scotland, and what are the different options that we have to pay for the action required to tackle climate change. So that's a pretty critical issue. And then, as we just heard the afternoon, we're going to really dig into what is meant by fair and how we can be sure that we tackle the climate emergency fairly in Scotland. But before we move on to any of that, we've got another short video, as we've heard from the Children's Parliament, their climate change investigators. And this video sets up the day, and particularly the afternoon's focus on fairness really, really nicely. As you know, there's no assembly members under the age of 16, but children in Scotland have a right to have their voices heard about the future of climate action in Scotland. After all, it's these children and all the others across Scotland who are going to live with the consequences of the decisions that we as a society are making right now. So this is a great reminder of why the work that you're all doing here is so important for Scotland's future. So let's hear that video. Let's see that video.
And to the Children's Parliament for that video. And as you heard, they're going to be back to show us the rest of their investigation in 2021 when we meet again. So good morning from me. You're all very welcome. It's great to see you all back here today. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go into the first of our breakouts for the day. And what we want you to do is to reflect really on what you heard in that video there and the voices of the children and what they shared. And then we'll see you back here shortly.
Sort of thinking how can we make sure that actually it's a two-way exchange with the Children's Parliament and the children and the rest of the members in this group as well. It looks like we're still waiting for a couple of the breakout rooms to make their way back, but we'll get started again as soon as everyone's back in the room. Yeah. Couple of groups seem to be hanging on to every last second they had there to chat, but this now looks like everyone is back. So over to you, Ian.
Thanks for that, Kayla. So yesterday you were all introduced to the three main streams that you as the Assembly will focus on in the new year. So just as a reminder, those streams are work and travel.
Hi,
home.
not hearing anybody.
Who? Can you hear us?
I can hear you but can't see you, Ian.
You can hear me but can't see me.
Yeah, well, I can.
I can hear you and see you.
Okay.
I can hear you and see you.
Some of you have the dubious ability not to see me. That's fantastic. If you can hear me, that's probably the more important bit. So I'll keep going and we can maybe sort out that technical bit for people. But just to remind you, there's three streams: work and travel, homes and communities, diet and lifestyle. And we heard from speakers on each of the topics, and they considered what the main challenges are in each of the areas. And we had those breakouts around that. So when we think about the streams and the different actions we need to take to tackle climate change, it's important that we consider both how we can reduce emissions in these areas or mitigate climate change, and also how we can be ready or adapt to the changes that we're already seeing and we'll see more of in the future. So with adaptation in mind, we're going to hear next from Anna Beswick at Adaptation Scotland and David Harkin at Historic Environment Scotland. So we've got a film that we're going to run now. Just a warning, Anne's film is a wee bit quiet in places, so apologies for that in advance, but can we run the film?
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much to Adaptation Scotland, Sniffer and Historic Environment Scotland for that video there. I hope you found that interesting and very insightful. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go back into our breakout groups. And what we want to do in this section really is to consider some of the adaptation and the impact and the thinking across the three different themes that we started discussing yesterday. So, where can we best focus to tackle the climate emergency in a fair and an effective way across work and travel, across home and community, and across dial, land use and lifestyles, drawing on what you just heard there in that video on adaptation. So yes, can we open our breakout groups, please?
Okay, so welcome back, people who came back from the breakout rooms. Hopefully you've been having some interesting conversations around adaptation and how does this add to what we've been talking about yesterday. We've still got people making their way back from breakout rooms, so we'll just give people that kind of 30 seconds for the rooms to close and everyone to transport through the magic of the internet and rejoin us back in the room. So we've still got people coming. I can see my little countdown at the bottom. And that looks like everyone's back with us. So Great. Hopefully you've had a good conversation. So we've got another presentation for you coming up now that's really focusing on sort of finances, but also really what are some of the levers? What are some of the ways that actually the types of changes that you've been talking about and thinking about can actually get made? So before I hand over to John to introduce himself and then introduce the video, the presentation he's made for you, we've had a couple of comments from people about sometimes not being able to see the videos very clearly. So one thing you might want to consider, and we talked about this a little bit last weekend, was you can change the view around. So usually in the top right-hand corner of your screen, you'll have options about view. And sometimes it's like gallery view or speaker view. But also when the videos are playing, you'll also have something called standard view for a lot of people. And that makes the videos a bit bigger and a bit easier to see. So you might want to do that if you've been having some of the problems with seeing the videos very clearly. So I'm going to hand over to John now to introduce himself and set us up for the next set of presentations.
Fantastic. Thank you, Kayla, and good morning, everybody. So my name's John Ward, and I've got a little presentation for you now looking at really two sets of issues. The first set of issues is around the policy levers that governments can pull and different policymakers can pull to try and encourage people to change their behavior. So when you're coming to think about actually making your recommendations, you're likely to want to make recommendations about how these changes can be achieved. And the presentation is trying to encourage you to think about some of the levers that you could recommend that policymakers should pull in order to try and achieve these goals. And then the second part of the presentation is thinking about when we talk about paying for things, what do we really mean by that? And who should pay and how can we encourage them to pay, or how can we make them pay? And it's just setting out some of the key issues around that.